Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the man in charge of the Lockerbie trial quits just weeks before it's due to start. The SNP say the resignation has let down Scotland in the eyes of the world, but ministers insist it hasn't. A warning to parents: get your babies vaccinated against fatal diseases or risk an outbreak of measles, mumps or rubella. And Glasgow gets tough with child workers, new bylaws to stop the illegal employment of under-16s. Good evening. Relatives of the Lockerbie victims say they feel disappointed by the shock resignation of the Lord Advocate just weeks before he was due to lead the prosecution of the two Libyans accused of the bombing. Today in the Scottish Parliament there were angry political exchanges over his sudden departure. Alex Salmond said Lord Hardy's resignation had let down Scotland in the eyes of the world. But tonight, the new Lord Advocate told Reporting Scotland he hoped to meet the victims' families, both here and in the United States, as soon as possible.
Mrs Thatcher was in power at the time of the Lockerbie atrocity. It was a Tory Lord Advocate who first accused the two men now awaiting trial of the crimes. But that trial only became a realistic prospect when Lord Hardy took the job he's now suddenly left. At the 10th anniversary in Washington, just over a year ago, anticipation among the American relatives was obvious. Within weeks of the two accused going into pre-trial custody in Holland, Lord Hardy was in America to brief families on progress. Yet now they wake up to news he's said goodbye to the trial of the century and just don't understand his motives for preferring a move to the Scottish bench.
I am appalled and amazed that at a moment like this, when you have this major trial, a trial such as you've never had in your history, that the Lord Advocate just decides to leave.
Here, the man who's consistently sought justice for his murdered daughter and all victims says he can't understand the change.
My concern is simply that there will have to be a rapid and comprehensive briefing of whoever steps into his shoes if he's to leave the prosecution team.
It's being strongly argued that the Lockerbie prosecution has taken so long to prepare that the experienced backroom team were the major players anyway. But observers say ministers were wrong to let Lord Hardy become a judge at this time.
So close to the biggest trial in Scottish legal history, a showcase for the Scottish legal system, why the First Minister at this time decided to nominate Lord Hardy for a seat on the bench. It strikes me as an amazing political decision, and the reaction we're seeing now could not have been unexpected.
Tonight, the man who's been thrust into the limelight by the change admitted relatives needed reassured.
Yes, I hope to get in touch with them as soon as possible and to go over to the United States to meet any of them that would wish to meet me.
Whatever his motives may be for the change of job that has projected Scottish politics today onto a worldwide stage, Lord Hardy's comments so far indicate we should look elsewhere than Lockerbie. Suggestions that he thinks the prosecution is a dead duck he calls outrageous, while Lord Hardy says abandoning the Lockerbie relatives is the last thing he would want to do. Alan Mackay, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, the decision by Lord Hardy to quit his job as Lord Advocate to take up a position as a High Court judge sparked some of the most acrimonious exchanges yet seen in the Scottish Parliament. Part of the reason for this is the peculiar position the Lord Advocate finds himself in. He's the Chief Law Officer advising ministers on legal problems in policy. He's also the head of the prosecution service in Scotland's courts. But alongside his roles in the legal system, he's also a member of Scotland's cabinet and therefore a politician.
The new Lord Advocate, Colin Boyd, accompanies the First Minister this afternoon. But controversy still surrounds Lord Hardy. Alex Salmond said he'd done a bunk, abandoning Lockerbie and the public interest.
Now, isn't that a matter not just of letting Scotland down, but letting Scotland down in the eyes of the world?
The new Solicitor General, Neil Davidson, looked on as Mr Salmond claimed he'd been rewarded for helping Labour in the past.
His actions such as this leave the First Minister open to that accusation that his administration is little more than a revolving door of jobs for the boys.
Well, I hope Alex Salmond doesn't think that kind of rather unpleasant and offensive attack that he's raising standards in Scottish politics.
And Mr Dewar insisted the Lockerbie prosecution was unhindered.
The conduct of the trial will be pursued effectively, efficiently and with diligence.
Like Lord Hardy, the new Lord Advocate will sit in the Scottish Cabinet. Critics say that political role compromises legal neutrality.
How can professional advisers act with detachment when inevitably they are politically compromised?
For Scotland's courts, the European Convention on Human Rights has hit everything, from the appointment of sheriffs to speeding laws. Critics say Lord Hardy bungled its introduction into Scots law. Ministers insist they're containing the problem. Critics also claim Lord Hardy effectively appointed himself a judge before that option vanished in a new selection system.
His nomination for this vacant place on the bench is himself. It does seem rather odd.
But ministers insist Lord Hardy's place on the bench was thoroughly merited after years of effort. A rough day for the executive, but tonight, as ever, they're looking ahead. Both legal appointments were ratified by MSPs and will go to the Queen for confirmation. Brian Taylor, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Coming up later on tonight's programme. The worst possible solution for air traffic control. Prestwick unions welcome MP's verdict on government plans for part privatisation. And poetry in motion. Commuters get a rattling good read on the 905 from Edinburgh. But first, it's over to Rona with tonight's sport.
Thanks, Fiona. Airdrie fans have been told their season tickets won't be honoured and they'll have to pay again to watch their side. Zero Ali will be back from international duty in time for Aberdeen's CIS Cup final, and Moravcik stays at Celtic for another year. All that plus John Leslie fails to make it for the Scotland rugby team to meet Ireland on Saturday. I'll have full details coming soon.
Scots parents have been told they're risking disastrous outbreaks of measles, mumps and rubella because of a drastic fall in the number of children being vaccinated against the 3 potentially fatal diseases. Doctors say the level of vaccination is now at a critical low and could lead to the deaths of children.
Immunisation is still part of growing up for a majority of our children, but doctors fear a decline in the use of the triple vaccine could allow potentially fatal diseases to take hold.
The virus, for its survival, needs to infect people. It cannot survive if they haven't got enough people around to be able to infect. So they can spread from one person to another. So you need to have a critical mass of children who are not immune for the virus to spread in the community.
One of the biggest falls in immunisation is in the Greater Glasgow area, even though a majority of parents want their children to be immunised against measles, mumps and rubella.
I've got 2 kids, one's 8 and he's 14 months, and they've had other vaccinations and they're fine.
My both children were vaccinated and they're both teenagers now, there's no bother.
The older ones were young. Certainly was a wee bit worried, but after the initial vaccination of the first child, it didn't worry me at all.
One of the concerns about immunisation is autism, with a significant number of families with autistic children convinced the triple vaccine played some part in their children's condition.
We keep coming back to this MMR vaccine as being the one thing which most parents feel is the sort of trigger point for the problems of their children.
But with the decline in immunisation, the risk increases that everyday social contact will spread potentially fatal infections such as measles. The take-up of the vaccination remains higher in Scotland than in many other parts of the UK. But the concern of health professionals is that if too many parents refuse to have their children vaccinated, there could be an outbreak of measles with serious health consequences for children. Sandy Murray, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Well, within the last few minutes, councillors in the Labour stronghold of North Lanarkshire have voted to tell the Scottish Executive not to scrap Clause 28, the law which forbids the promotion in schools of the acceptability of a homosexual lifestyle. Well, I'm joined now from Motherwell by our reporter Rob Flett. Rob, can you tell us what's been happening this afternoon and this evening?
Well, there's been a full meeting of North Lanarkshire Council at which the Council have delivered a very direct message to the Scottish Executive that they do not support the withdrawal of Section 28, the legislation which prevents the promotion of homosexuality in schools. Councillors voted by a large majority, so large they didn't even bother counting the votes, but a large majority that they want the Scottish Executive to think again. They want them to carry out further consultation and discussion with interested groups, but they also want the Scottish Executive to recognise that they, the Labour and the SNP councillors here, do not back the withdrawal of Section 28.
How much of an embarrassment do you think this is going to be to the executive? Because we are talking about Labour's heartland here.
Well, this is very much a Labour heartland. There are 56 Labour councillors here, 12 SNP and 2 independent. And as I say, the large majority of them voted to snub the Scottish Executive. Now, there was real radical criticism of the way that the Executive has handled the whole debate. There was criticism from Labour benches here that said that the Scottish Executive had been completely incompetent and had completely misread public opinion and the strength of public opinion on this matter. Media House, the company which is running the Keep the Clause campaign, have called this a massive snub to the Scottish Executive in its own backyard, and they say that they must listen to their people. But the Scottish Executive, commenting after hearing the result tonight, said that they'd already carried out a national consultation campaign on the matter of Section 28, and as far as they were concerned, they'd be continuing to go on the basis of that national consultation exercise.
Rob Flett and Motherwell, thank you very much for joining us. Glasgow City Council is to get tough with the growing problem of child workers. New bylaws will mean firms taking on under 16-year-olds without a proper work permit could be fined up to £1,000.
Every night in the city, youngsters can be seen selling newspapers. Glasgow City Council reckons there are 3,000 school pupils aged 13, 14 and 15 working part-time illegally. The council feels they're being exploited. City employers are to be told they must apply for a work permit on behalf of every school-aged pupil they employ under 16.
We don't want them overworking, being tired, coming to school late, falling asleep at school. So yes, we're quite happy that young people should work, but we want to safeguard their access to education.
14-year-old Adele Kerr works in a city centre hairdressers on Saturdays. She feels it benefits her.
I'd like to do something, and so a hairdresser is really the only place that takes you on when you're as young. So I just thought I'd try, and I got it. So
to give you some extra pocket money as well?
Yeah, it gives me a lot of extra pocket money.
Children will still be banned from working in fairgrounds and amusement arcades, cinemas and nightclubs. The new bylaws have been broadly welcomed.
One of the brilliant things is that now we have a legislation that can allow young people to actually go out to work and do something with their life. Listen, is it not better than them doing drugs?
The council says if employers ignore the new laws, they face the consequences of a hefty fine. Leslie Anderson, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Scottish air traffic controllers have welcomed a report which is highly critical of government plans to sell off most of the service. The Labour-dominated Transport Select Committee says the proposals are flawed on grounds of safety and cost. The move comes just days after ministers announced plans for a £400 million investment in the Prestwick Control Centre.
Clear blue skies and perfect flying weather over Westminster today. A chance for passengers to take in a bit of high-level sightseeing. But back on the ground, things are not so calm. The row over the future of Britain's air traffic control is getting more heated by the day. In opposition, Labour oppose Conservative plans to sell the service off.
Labour will do everything we can to block this sell-off. Our air is not for sale.
But since coming into power, ministers have changed their tune. They now insist bringing in new private money and the profit motive is the only way to improve a hard-pressed service. According to MPs, it's a flawed argument. They say there's no case for the public-private partnership. The government's proposals are the worst of all options, and it could see costs rise and safety jeopardised.
We do not believe that the government have made a sufficiently strong case for the proposed sale and the manner of that sale.
Privatisation of air traffic control is not in anybody's interest. The pilots don't like it, the controllers don't like it, the public don't like it. It seems to be the government are driving this one, and this report will hopefully go some way to changing their minds.
Today's report comes just days after the government confirmed plans for a multi-million-pound upgrading of facilities at the Prestwick Air Traffic Control Centre. Ministers insist those proposals are still on course.
We've confirmed that Prestwick will go ahead, and we've put in place the kind of agreements that will supply the money, again, to give us the best equipment so that we've got the first-rate system which will carry us through the decades ahead.
This report is all the more embarrassing for ministers because it comes from a Labour-dominated Select Committee, just as the legislation is going through the Commons. It'll do nothing to lessen the row over who controls the planes in Britain's skies. David Porter, reporting Scotland, Westminster.
Strathclyde Police have raised a court action against Greenock Morton Football Club for around £29,000 for policing matches. Morton say they'll defend the action as their offer of £15,000 to settle the account had been turned down. The club say they've been pleading for years to have policing reduced. They say that while the average for an Old Firm game is one policeman to around 700 spectators, the ratio has been as high as one officer per 50 fans at Kapaloo. A collection of Chinese paintings which have never been seen before in the UK have arrived in Edinburgh. The paintings belong to the Shanghai Museum and they were only allowed to travel to Scotland if a team of 5 Chinese curators came with them.
Chinese art is rarely toured to the UK. This collection from Shanghai Museum has never been seen here before. Its presence at the Royal Museum of Scotland is the result of a meeting between the Scottish and Chinese culture ministers and months of negotiations. It was only agreed if a team of Chinese curators could travel with it. And although it looks like a traditional collection, this is China's version of modern art.
They like to go back to tradition, and in order to learn from tradition and to develop a point that past, develop new styles. So you have a combination of old styles, new styles, and you also have the coming of the Western painting.
Shanghai used to be one of the most thriving ports in China. These days it's a modern, bustling city, but in the midst of modernisation there was little time for culture. The Shanghai Museum is a recent addition built to house 120,000 different artefacts, and it seems they want the world to know about it.
It's a big, thriving international metropolis, but it's not the capital of China. And I think that Shanghai is looking to make links, not just with Edinburgh, but with cities perhaps through Europe and other parts of the world.
The exhibition doesn't actually open until the weekend, but Edinburgh's Chinese community has already had a sneak preview.
Those paintings are really marvelous. I love them very much. It is an important cultural exchange between the People's Republic of China and the UK.
And the hope is that this cultural exchange will continue and that the residents of Shanghai will soon have their first taste of traditional Scottish culture. Pauline McLean, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
Well, time now for a look at tonight's sport with Rona.
Thanks, Fiona. Airdrie fans have been told their season tickets are no longer valid and they'll have to pay once again to watch their side. The move comes as provisional liquidators KPMG attempt to keep the team in action. Meanwhile, Steve Archibald has told BBC Scotland he won't be bidding for the club until he knows the full extent of their debt. The message is clear for supporters of Airdrie. You'll have to pay so they can play. Season tickets will not be honoured and corporate box holders will have to pay again for further hospitality.
What we're simply doing is asking them to contribute to the ongoing costs. These ongoing costs, probably 75% of them are simply staff and players' costs. So all the money that the fans give, Save the Diamonds give, the corporate sponsors give, everything that we get at the moment is simply going towards the ongoing running costs. It isn't going anywhere near that black hole.
BBC Scotland understand the black hole of debt is around £2 million and a reported figure of around £4 million is exaggeration. However, KPMG say there are still no firm proposals to buy the club.
We've got a major problem. We're on the brink of extinction. You know, we could be the next third Lanark, and there is nobody happy here. The fans aren't happy. The fans don't like reading all the speculation and nothing coming to fruition. We're currently in provisional liquidation. It's a sorry state of affairs. But that's the state. That's a fact, and you know the only way to rectify that is by support and by financial contributions by all parties.
Aberdeen's Moroccan star Hisham Zerouali says he'll be back from international duty in time to play against Celtic in the final of the CIS Insurance Cup. Meanwhile, Celtic fans have been boosted by the news that Lubomir Moravcik has signed a new deal with the club to keep him at Parkhead for another year. Moravcik was the only scorer in last night's Cup semi-final, which eliminated Kilmarnock. The goal, a powerful header, came in the 66th minute. Confusion reigned a few minutes later as referee Jim McCluskey sent Killy's Christoph Cockard off for his second bookable offence as he clashed with Jackie McNamara. McCluskey then produced a yellow and a red card for the Celtic player before protest convinced the ref McNamara had not been booked earlier. Well, history caught up with giant killing Caley Thistle ahead of their Scottish Cup fourth round clash with Aberdeen at the weekend. With the Inverness side's victory over Celtic being heralded as the biggest upset in Cup history, one of the men who carried that accolade until last week paid them a visit.
33 years after scoring Berwick's goal that catapulted Rangers out of the Scottish Cup, diminutive Sammy Reid at last got his hands on the oldest football trophy still being played for. That 1967 shock went down in football folklore, and Sammy disputes whether Caley Thistle's 3-1 dispatch of Celtic actually tops it.
I'm inclined to think that Berwick won is still the biggest upset, because that particular season that Berwick beat Rangers get beaten in the final of a European Cup, and I don't think Celtic's going to get beaten in the final this year.
The 67 results certainly put Berwick on the map. Inverness is now basking in similar glory. So will Caley Thistle's goal scorers still be remembered more than a generation from now?
I'm not too sure if it'll be the same as what Sammy's went through. He was just speaking to us earlier saying that it has been 33 years it's went with her. It would be nice to think that the same recognition was given, but I'll just wait and see.
It's all about the romance of the cup. It's great for Sammy to get a hold of the cup and that, you know, but that's something that's the cup's all about.
Scotland's rugby selectors have resisted the temptation to rush captain John Leslie back into the side for the Six Nations clash with Ireland in Dublin at the weekend. The only change comes in the backs, with Graham Shiel coming in to replace the injured skipper. But it's the same lineup for the forwards as last time around against Italy. The side left Edinburgh Airport this afternoon for Dublin, and despite not being in the team, Leslie travels to Ireland. Although now recovered from the injury picked up during the defeat in Rome, selectors have decided not to risk him, as another knock could keep him out for 6 weeks. The clash against Ireland is a fixture that Scotland haven't lost for 12 years. Work has begun on a massive oil painting of the famous 18th hole at the Old Course in St Andrews to mark this year's Open Championship. The giant canvas, measuring some 6 feet by 8 feet, is to be auctioned at the start of the event and is already attracting interest from around the world.
The 18th fairway with the Swilcan Bridge in the foreground is recognised by golfers the world over. It'll feature in the official Open print, which is commissioned each year by the R&A. 5 years ago, artist Graham Baxter undertook a large-scale work which now hangs in the Old Course Hotel, something he'll now repeat.
We're all very excited about it. Graham has talked to us about his plans, and obviously we know what he can do with the prints. We've seen what he's done before with the large scale, and we're all very excited to see what it will turn out for 2000.
As with all paintings, the artist starts with a blank canvas. In this case, however, it's a small-scale sketch to allow him to gauge the perspective and get a feel for the scene.
It's all very well working from photographs, which I normally do, but the important aspect is to come here and get a feel of the place and get a feel of the atmosphere, and there's always a fantastic atmosphere at St Andrews with the history and everything going on round about. It's wonderful.
10 minutes later and the sketch is complete. For Graham, who's been painting golf landscapes for more than a decade, this is one of his biggest challenges to date.
It's a great honour now to be commissioned to be doing this painting, particularly in view of the fact that it's the Millennium Open at St Andrews and back at the home of golf, the great history we've got here. It's just fantastic.
It'll take the full 5 months from now until the Open for the painting to be completed. Then it'll be auctioned just before the championship gets underway. In a few short months, this empty area behind me will be full of thousands of fans. They'll have come to see who's going to pick up the most famous prize in golf. Perhaps one of them will already have picked up what could become the most famous piece of golfing memorabilia.
There we are. Are you going to be bidding for it then, Fiona?
Absolutely. Well, from the visual arts to the performing arts, and East Lothian councils have come up with a novel way of taking the strain off the train, Poetry in Motion, and it's reciting rhymes to rail commuters.
Rush hour at Waverley Station. Commuters battle through the crowds on another busy day. Travelling to and from work can add to the stress levels.
In an attempt to calm any frayed nerves and take away the dreary dullness of the daily slog, East Lothian councils come up with a cure for commuter blues. On this train from Edinburgh to Dunbar, there's a man who promises to wipe away your worries with poetry.
I don't like this, being carried sideways through the night. I feel wrong and helpless, like a timber broadside in a fast stream.
The aim is to put passengers' nerves back on track with verses and persuade people to think again about poems.
Some people have had very bad experiences of poetry at school, forced to learn iambic pentameters and such like, and the idea is to just remind them that it can be quite new and fresh and interesting and that they might not hate it. Would you like a poem ticket? It's a poetry train today, we're heading out.
So is this just the ticket for tired travellers, or do some commuters feel the idea's off the rails?
I have never seen anything like this before, no.
Something a bit to take your mind off the journey is quite nice.
Very good, it broke the monotony anyway.
Maybe a bit of reggae or something like that, but no poems, no.
If the poem project proves popular, it could signal regular readings of rhymes on the rails. This could become a permanent platform for wordsmiths, making poetry a more moving experience. Maura Kinneborough reporting Scotland, Dunbar.
And now to our weather bard, here's Heather.
I'll do my best. Thanks very much, Fiona. Hello there. And the weather did settle down for most of us today, although we did see a good deal of snow still lying around near Daviot, near Inverness. And on the radar, the first signs of some rain just edging in from the Atlantic during the afternoon, then developing and becoming widespread in western Scotland this evening. It's all down to a low pressure system on the isobar chart. That's going to track eastwards overnight, along with the heavier, more persistent rain, some snow on high ground. But eventually it does clear into the North Sea, but followed by a good deal of cloud and showers, especially in the west. So tonight, a wet spell of weather for most of us as this band of heavier rain pushes eastwards. Some sleet and snow on high ground above about 200 metres or 600 feet, but possibly at lower levels in the northeast for a time as well. Then later on in the night, that heavier rain does clear away, but followed by a good deal of cloud and some showers, especially in the north and west. There will be some breaks in the cloud in eastern areas towards morning, and temperatures could get low enough for a touch of ground frost, so 1 or 2 icy patches on the roads, but milder in the west at 3 or 4 degrees. Then tomorrow, well, it looks a rather showery day for most of us, some longer spells of rain, especially in the Northern Isles. The showers will still be quite wintry on the hills, and we should see the odd sunny interval from time to time, especially in the southeast of Scotland. Some good breaks in the cloud for Fife, East Lothian, eastern parts of the borders as well. There will be 1 or 2 showers to contend with nonetheless. As for temperatures, a little bit milder tomorrow, between 5 and 7 Celsius, but feeling rather chilly around the north coast with this brisk northeasterly wind. As for the rest of the UK, some brighter skies for the east of England, but a good deal of shower activity out to the west here. Some wintry showers across the Pennines and in towards Snowdonia, and a top temperature of 10 Celsius along the English Channel coast, that's 50 Fahrenheit. The outlook now for the weekend and the start of next week. Well, on the face of it, the weekend looks not too bad at all. High pressure holding on for most of it before we see the low pressure systems return from the Atlantic, bringing some wet weather. But the details for Saturday, showers should retreat to northern coasts to leave a good deal of bright and sunny weather for us, although it will be chilly. A frost overnight into Sunday, but a good deal of bright weather before the rain moves into the west during the evening. So I'll leave you with a quick look at tomorrow's summary. A rather showery day, I'm afraid. Some snow on the hills, the best of the sunshine in the southeast. Fiona.
Thanks, Heather. Well, another look at tonight's main stories. Relatives of the Lockerbie victims say they feel let down by the surprise resignation of the Lord Advocate, Lord Hardy. It comes just weeks before the trial of the 2 Libyans accused of the bombing. His successor has assured the families it won't affect the prosecution case. The NHS is being accused of failing to make